All right, everyone, get ready for today's deep dive. We're tackling a topic that might seem a little dry at first, but trust me, it's super important we're talking FDA regulations, specifically 21 CFR Part 211 Subpart D.
Hmm.
Now, you might be thinking, Subpart D, what's that? Sounds boring.
Yeah.
But hold on. This is the nitty-gritty of equipment used in pharmaceutical manufacturing. And making sure that equipment is designed right, maintained well, and squeaky clean. That's literally the difference between a life-saving medication and, well, something that could be really dangerous.
That's a great way to put it. It's like, you wouldn't bake a cake with a rusty old mixer, would you?
No way.
The same goes for making medicine, only the stakes are way higher. We're talking about people's health here.
Okay, so Subpart D is basically the rule book for all the equipment used to make those pills and potions we rely on. Pretty comprehensive, covering everything from the materials used to build the equipment to how often it's got to be cleaned.
And for good reason. One of the biggest concerns in pharmaceutical manufacturing is contamination. Imagine a mixing vessel that wasn't properly cleaned after the last batch. You could have traces of a completely different drug ending up in your medicine.
Oh, that's scary. So that's the kind of nightmare scenario Subpart D is designed to prevent, right?
Exactly. And it does that by setting strict guidelines for equipment design. Everything has to be made from materials that are easy to clean and resist corrosion. You don't want bits of rust or metal flaking off into your medicine.
No, definitely not. So that means no hidden nooks and crannies where things can build up, I'm guessing.
You got it. Every surface needs to be smooth and accessible for cleaning. And speaking of cleaning, Subpart D doesn't just say clean your equipment. It lays out very specific procedures: how to clean, what cleaning agents to use, and how often cleaning has to happen. It's all about minimizing that risk of contamination.
It's like a super detailed cleaning checklist then.
Yeah.
And I bet there's a ton of documentation involved.
Oh, you bet. Every cleaning, every calibration, every repair, it's all documented. Think of it as creating a paper trail, a history of that equipment's life, showing how it's been cared for and used over time.
So you're basically building a biography for each piece of equipment.
That's a great way to put it. It shows that a company is complying with the regulations, but it also provides a valuable record of how the equipment's been treated.
Makes sense. So we've got design, cleaning, and what about maintenance? I imagine keeping everything in tip-top shape is a big part of Subpart D as well, right?
Absolutely. Think of it like taking your car in for regular tune-ups. Preventative maintenance helps keep things running smoothly and prevents those costly breakdowns, which, in a pharmaceutical facility, could delay production or even compromise product quality.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got design, cleaning, and maintenance all covered. But how do we know that the equipment is actually working the way it's supposed to in the first place?
That's where calibration and validation come in the dynamic duo of reliable pharmaceutical manufacturing.
Calibration and validation. Those sound pretty technical. Can you break them down for me? What exactly do they involve?
Sure, calibration is about making sure the equipment is accurate. Imagine you're tuning a musical instrument. You adjust the strings on a guitar to get the right notes. Calibration is like that for pharmaceutical equipment. It's about making sure those measurements are precise, spot on.
So if a piece of equipment is measuring, say, the amount of active ingredient in a drug, it needs to be super accurate. Even a tiny error could make a big difference.
You got it. That's why calibration is so crucial. And it's not a one-time thing. Depending on the equipment, it might need to be calibrated daily, weekly, or monthly. And of course, all those calibrations are documented meticulously.
Wow, it's a lot to keep track of. Okay, so we've got the equipment calibrated and accurate, but how do we know it's actually doing what it's designed to do consistently and reliably?
That's where validation comes in. It's all about proving that a piece of equipment can produce products that meet those strict specifications every time, without fail. It's like putting the equipment through a series of tests, often mimicking real-world manufacturing conditions to make sure it's up to the task.
So it's not enough to just say, hey, this machine works.
Yep.
You have to prove it right. Show the data.
Exactly. And that data is collected through rigorous testing and, of course, documented carefully. You're basically building a case file for each piece of equipment, demonstrating that it's reliable and fit for its purpose.
I'm starting to see how important documentation is in all of this. It's like a constant thread running through every aspect of equipment management.
It really is. Documentation is essential for demonstrating compliance with FDA regulations, but it also provides a valuable historical record of how the equipment's been used and maintained.
Right. Okay, so we've covered design, cleaning, maintenance, calibration, and validation. It's a lot to keep track of. But I can see how each piece is crucial for ensuring those medications we rely on are safe and effective.
Absolutely. It's all interconnected, and it all boils down to one thing: patient safety.
And speaking of patient safety, I remember reading about a case where a company had to recall a batch of medication because their equipment wasn't properly calibrated. It turned out the pills ended up containing way too much of the active ingredient.
That's a perfect example of why these regulations are so important. It wasn't just a costly recall, it was a potential risk to patients. Poor calibration could have had serious consequences.
That's a powerful reminder that these regulations, even the ones that seem pretty mundane, have a huge impact in the real world.
Yeah.
It's not just about paperwork, it's about people's lives.
Exactly. And it's not just about preventing harm either. Proper equipment management can also improve the quality and effectiveness of medications. For example, let's think about those strict cleaning procedures again.
Okay, back to cleaning.
Imagine a medication that's designed to treat a serious infection. If there's even the tiniest trace of contamination from a previous batch, it could reduce the drug's effectiveness, making it less potent, and that could put the patient at risk.
So those rigorous cleaning procedures aren't just about preventing contamination, they're also about making sure the medication works as well as it possibly can.
You got it. And it's not just cleaning. Proper calibration ensures that the correct amount of active ingredient is in each dose, maximizing the drug's therapeutic effect. And validation makes sure that the equipment is performing consistently, batch after batch, producing high-quality medication every time.
It's incredible how all these seemingly technical details really come back to the patient. It's all about making sure they receive safe, effective, and reliable medication.
Precisely. That's why the FDA has such stringent regulations in place for equipment. It's about protecting patients and ensuring they're getting the best possible care.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. Design, cleaning, maintenance, calibration, validation. It's clear that Subpart D is a really comprehensive rule book for pharmaceutical equipment. But how do these rules translate into real-world practice? I'm curious to hear about some real-world examples of how Subpart D is applied in those pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities.
Great question. Let's start by taking a closer look at cleaning procedures and how something called risk management plays a crucial role in how those procedures are developed.
Risk management. Now, I thought we were talking about cleaning.
We are, but remember, everything in pharmaceutical manufacturing is connected. When developing cleaning procedures, companies have to think about the potential risks if cleaning isn't done properly. That's where risk management comes in.
Okay, so walk me through this. What kind of risks are we talking about when it comes to cleaning equipment?
The biggest one is cross-contamination. If you don't clean a piece of equipment properly, residues from previous batches could contaminate the next batch. That's called product adulteration.
That sounds like a really serious issue. It could affect the safety and effectiveness of the medication, right?
Exactly. That's why when companies develop cleaning procedures, they have to assess the risk of cross-contamination for each piece of equipment and each product they're making. They can't just have a one-size-fits-all approach.
So the cleaning procedures have to be tailored to the specific risk.
Exactly. Products with a higher risk of contamination, like injectable medications or those with really potent active ingredients, those are going to require much stricter cleaning procedures.
I see. So what kinds of factors go into deciding the risk level for a specific product?
Well, there are a few. First, how potent is the product? Then there's the toxicity of any potential contaminants. And finally, how is it administered?
So something highly potent that goes directly into the bloodstream, like an IV medication, that's going to be a higher risk than, say, a topical cream that's not as strong.
Precisely. You want to be extra careful with those medications that are going directly into the bloodstream or those that are treating really serious conditions.
Makes sense. So it's not just a quick scrub with soap and water. It's a carefully thought out approach based on the risks involved.
Exactly. Risk management helps determine what needs to be done for each situation. And of course, all those cleaning procedures need to be documented in detail. Every step of the process, from the cleaning agent's use to the drying time, it all needs to be written down.
So we've got risk assessment, detailed procedures, documentation. But what about the people who are actually doing the cleaning?
That's a crucial part. Companies need to make sure their personnel are trained properly on those cleaning procedures, and someone needs to be supervising to ensure that those procedures are being followed consistently.
Right. So it's not just about having this fancy cleaning protocol on paper. It's about making sure everyone on the ground knows it, understands it, and follows it.
Exactly. It's about building a culture of quality where everyone understands that cleaning is essential for preventing contamination.
Wow, I'm starting to see how much detail goes into something as seemingly simple as cleaning. And it all goes back to making sure medications are safe and effective.
That's right. And it's not just cleaning. These risk management principles are applied throughout the entire life cycle of the equipment, from the initial design and qualification all the way to maintenance and even decommissioning.
Okay, so cleaning was just one example. Risk management really impacts all aspects of equipment management in pharmaceuticals.
It does. Let's take another critical area, preventative maintenance. We touched on it before, but let's dig a little deeper into how risk management shapes the preventative maintenance schedule for each piece of equipment.
All right, let's shift gears from cleaning to preventative maintenance. I'm ready.
Remember that analogy of taking your car in for regular tune-ups? Well, preventive maintenance in a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility is similar, but the stakes are, well, even higher. Just like you wouldn't wait for your car to break down before getting it serviced, you don't want a critical piece of equipment to fail in the middle of production.
That makes sense. But I imagine there are tons of different pieces of equipment in a facility like that. Do they all have the same preventative maintenance schedule?
No, not at all. The schedule is tailored to the level of risk associated with each piece of equipment. A simple, low-risk piece of equipment might only need a basic checkup once a year, but a complex system, something critical to production, that might require weekly, maybe even daily maintenance.
So how do you figure out the risk level for a particular piece of equipment?
It's a multifaceted assessment, takes a few things into consideration. How important is the equipment to the process? Could it bring production to a halt if it fails? What would happen if it malfunctions? Could it compromise product quality or even pose a safety hazard? And how has the equipment performed in the past? Does it have a history of breakdowns or issues?
So you're not just following a generic checklist from the manufacturer, you're really considering the specific risks involved with each piece of equipment.
Exactly. That risk-based approach is essential for making sure preventative maintenance is effective. You're focusing on the areas that are most likely to cause problems.
I'm starting to see how this whole risk management mindset is woven into every aspect of equipment management in pharmaceuticals. It's about thinking ahead, being proactive.
Precisely. And that proactive approach not only minimizes risk, but also makes things more efficient. Imagine a scenario where a critical piece of equipment fails unexpectedly.
Uh-oh, that doesn't sound good.
It could lead to a complete halt in production, delayed batches, potentially even product shortages.
And I'm sure that would be costly, both in terms of money and potentially even affecting patient care.
Exactly. But by implementing a solid risk-based preventative maintenance program, companies can often avoid those scenarios. Regular maintenance helps identify potential problems before they turn into big ones.
So it's like investing a little time and effort up front to prevent bigger problems down the road.
That's a great way to put it. And that investment really pays off. You get increased reliability, reduced costs, and most importantly, enhanced patient safety.
It's amazing how something as seemingly mundane as preventative maintenance can have such a big impact.
It really is. It's all about understanding that every aspect of equipment management is connected and plays a role in ensuring those medications are safe and effective.
So we've talked about cleaning and preventative maintenance, both heavily influenced by risk management. What other areas of Subpart D are impacted by this risk-based approach?
Well, one really crucial area is equipment qualification. Remember how we talked about proving that equipment is fit for its intended purpose?
Right, that's validation.
Exactly. Well, before you can validate a piece of equipment, you need to qualify it. And the level of scrutiny required for that qualification, that's also determined by risk management.
So you're saying not every piece of equipment needs to be qualified to the same extent.
That's right. A simple piece of equipment, something that's not really critical to the process, might not need the same level of scrutiny as a complex, high-risk system.
Okay, that makes sense. You don't want to waste resources applying the same level of rigor to everything.
Exactly. A risk-based approach to qualification lets companies focus their efforts on the areas that are most likely to pose a risk to product quality or patient safety.
So how would this work in practice? You mentioned different types of qualification, DQ, IQ, OQ, and PQ. How would risk management be applied to each of those?
Good question. Let's start with design qualification, or DQ. Here, risk management guides the assessment of the equipment's design. You want to make sure that design meets the user requirements and can reliably perform the necessary functions.
So you're looking for any potential flaws in the design that could affect the equipment's performance or maybe increase the risk of contamination.
Exactly. You might look at the materials used to build the equipment to make sure they're compatible with the products being manufactured, make sure they won't leach any harmful substances. You'd also look at the equipment's controls and safety features to make sure they're appropriate for the way it's going to be used.
Okay, so DQ is all about making sure the equipment is designed for safety and effectiveness right from the start. What about installation qualification, or IQ?
IQ focuses on making sure the equipment is installed correctly the way it's supposed to be. That helps minimize the risk of operational issues down the line. You check that it's installed according to the manufacturer's specifications, make sure all the connections are secure, things like that.
So making sure the equipment is set up for success in its new home.
That's it. And you'd also make sure the environment where it's installed is suitable. Does it have access to the necessary utilities like power and water? Is the temperature and humidity right?
Okay, so it's not just about plugging it in and hoping for the best. It's about making sure the surrounding environment is appropriate for the equipment. What about operational qualification, or OQ? What happens during that phase?
OQ is all about testing. You're running tests to make sure the equipment can do its job correctly and reliably. You're looking at things like temperature controls, pressure gauges, alarms, and making sure they're functioning the way they should within the specified limits.
So it's like a test drive for the equipment.
Exactly. And of course, you're documenting all those tests carefully.
Right. So we've established that the equipment is designed right, installed properly, and it operates within the expected parameters.
Yeah.
Now, what about performance qualification, or PQ? What happens there?
PQ is the final stage. It's where you really put the equipment through its paces. You're simulating real-world production conditions to demonstrate that the equipment can consistently produce products that meet those required specifications, even under pressure.
So it's not just testing in a controlled lab setting. You're trying to mimic what it'll be like out on the manufacturing floor.
Exactly. You'd be running the equipment with the actual product, adjusting the operating parameters, and basically challenging it to see if it can handle the variability of real-world production.
So it's like a final exam for the equipment.
That's a great way to put it. And it's through this whole rigorous qualification process, guided by risk management every step of the way, that companies can prove their equipment is up to the task and ready to produce those high-quality medications.
This whole risk-based approach to qualification sounds like a really smart way to do things. It seems like it would help focus resources on the areas that matter most for product quality and patient safety.
It does. It's all about being strategic and efficient, making sure the effort you put into qualification is proportional to the potential impact of that equipment.
Well, it's really interesting to see how this risk-based thinking is integrated into every aspect of equipment qualification.
It's crucial. It helps ensure the equipment is reliable and minimizes the potential for costly deviations and quality issues later on.
And it's clear that risk management is a big part of the whole pharmaceutical quality system. It influences everything from cleaning procedures to preventative maintenance schedules to how rigorously equipment is qualified.
Absolutely. Risk management should be built into every decision in pharmaceutical manufacturing. It's all about putting patient safety and product quality first.
Well, I'm really enjoying this deep dive. What else could you tell us about how Subpart D is applied in the real world and how it relates to the overall quality system?
Okay, let's talk about change control. Change is inevitable, right? But in the pharmaceutical world, change has to be managed very carefully, especially when it comes to equipment. Even a small modification to a piece of equipment could have a ripple effect on the whole manufacturing process.
That makes sense. It's like changing one ingredient in a recipe. It could totally change the outcome. So how do pharmaceutical companies handle these changes and make sure they don't lead to unexpected problems?
That's where change control comes in. It's a systematic process for evaluating, approving, and documenting any changes to equipment. The goal is to make sure those changes don't have a negative impact on product quality or patient safety.
So it's like a safety net for any modifications to the equipment.
You got it. It helps ensure that changes are made thoughtfully, with a clear understanding of the potential risks and benefits. And this isn't just for big changes like replacing an entire piece of equipment. Even seemingly small things like adjusting a setting or adding a new part can trigger this whole change control process.
Wow, so a pretty comprehensive system. It sounds like companies aren't taking any chances when it comes to making changes. So what exactly does this change control process look like?
It usually starts with a formal request for change, a document that describes the proposed modification, why it's being made, and the potential impact it could have.
So it's not just about making the change, you're also justifying it and really thinking through the potential consequences.
Exactly. And that's just the first step. That request then gets reviewed by a team of experts from different departments. They look at the proposed change from all angles, the scientific, technical, and regulatory aspects. They're looking for anything that might raise a red flag or needs more investigation.
So it's a group decision, not just one person making the call.
Right, it's a collaborative process. That multidisciplinary approach helps ensure that all potential risks and benefits are considered before they give the green light.
Okay, so let's say the team decides that the change is justified and they don't see any major risks. Does that mean they just give it a thumbs up and everyone moves on?
Not quite. Even if a change is approved, it doesn't mean it's a free-for-all. The approval often comes with certain conditions and instructions for how to implement the change.
Like what kind of conditions?
It could be a lot of things. They might require more testing to make sure the change doesn't create new risks. Or they might specify what kind of training operators need to receive before using the modified equipment. The main goal is to make sure the change is rolled out safely and effectively without disrupting the overall process too much.
So it's not just about saying yes or no to the change. It's about carefully managing the whole process.
Exactly. And then once the change is implemented, you guessed it, everything is documented. You create a record of the entire process, why the change was needed, how it was approved, how it was put into practice, and any testing or validation results.
That's a lot of paperwork.
Yeah,
But I can see how it's important. It keeps everyone informed and accountable.
absolutely. That documentation serves a few purposes. It helps show the FDA that you're following the rules, it ensures consistency, and it provides a valuable record of how the equipment has evolved over time.
It's like a detailed logbook of the equipment's life.
Exactly. That record can be incredibly valuable if you ever need to troubleshoot problems or understand why certain decisions were made in the past.
Makes sense. This whole process makes me think about the importance of having qualified people involved. You need people with specific expertise to evaluate these changes and make sure they're implemented correctly.
Absolutely. Only qualified personnel should be involved in the change control process. These are individuals who really understand the equipment, the manufacturing process, and the regulations. They need to be able to assess the impact of a change from multiple angles.
It really emphasizes that this isn't just about machines and regulations. It's about a team of skilled professionals working together to make sure those medications are safe.
Precisely. That teamwork is crucial for navigating the complexities of change control in pharmaceutical manufacturing.
Well, this deep dive is really highlighting how important change control is in this industry.
It's a vital part of ensuring equipment is reliable and that product quality is maintained.
And it's essential for showing the FDA that you're doing things by the book.
Right. The FDA expects companies to have a robust change control process that's well documented, that shows them you're committed to managing change responsibly.
This all makes me think about what happens when something does go wrong with a piece of equipment, even with all these precautions in place. Are there investigations?
That's a great question. Let's talk about the role of equipment in investigations and how those investigations can actually lead to improvements.
All right, let's get into it. Investigations sound a bit intimidating, but I'm ready to learn more.
No matter how well designed or maintained equipment is, sometimes things do go wrong. And when that happens, it's crucial to figure out why and take steps to prevent it from happening again. Those investigations often involve taking a close look at the equipment itself, searching for clues about what might have happened.
So the equipment becomes like a key piece of evidence in the investigation.
Absolutely. Equipment generates a ton of data, from operating parameters like temperature and pressure to alarm records and process logs. That data can help investigators piece together the sequence of events leading up to the problem and identify potential factors that contributed to it.
So you're not just looking at the physical equipment, you're looking at all the data it generated, kind of like a detective searching for digital fingerprints.
That's a great analogy. That data can be really valuable in pinpointing the root cause of a problem. For example, imagine a situation where a batch of medication fails a potency test. Investigators might look at the equipment's calibration records to see if it was functioning correctly during production.
And if it turns out the equipment wasn't properly calibrated, that could explain why the batch failed.
Exactly. It suggests the equipment might have delivered the wrong amount of the active ingredient, leading to that potency issue.
So the data generated by equipment can be a really important clue when it comes to investigations.
It is, and it's not just about the data itself, but how that data is managed. Remember those LCOA principles we talked about before?
Attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, and accurate. Yeah, They were about ensuring data integrity.
Precisely. The FDA has very strict expectations for data integrity in pharmaceutical manufacturing, especially when it comes to data from equipment. They want to see that the data is reliable, hasn't been manipulated or falsified in any way.
So it's not just about having the data, it's about making sure it's accurate, complete, and protected from tampering.
Exactly. Data integrity is crucial for drawing the right conclusions from investigations and making informed decisions about what needs to be done to correct the problem.
Okay, so equipment and its data are essential for investigations. But what happens after the investigation is done? What steps are taken to prevent the same issue from popping up again?
That's where corrective and preventative actions, or KPA, come in. This is a crucial part of the overall quality system, ensuring that companies learn from their mistakes and make things better.
So it's not just about figuring out what went wrong, you have to actually fix it and take steps to prevent it from happening again.
You got it. KPA is about turning those investigations into opportunities for improvement.
Could you give me an example of how KPI might be used to address an equipment issue?
Sure, let's go back to that example of the improperly calibrated equipment. The investigation might have revealed that the calibration procedure was outdated or that the technician who did the calibration wasn't trained properly.
So those are the root causes, the underlying reasons for the problem.
Yeah.
How would KP address those?
Well, the company might make some changes to the way things are done, like updating the calibration procedure to reflect the current best practices. They might provide additional training to the technicians. To prevent similar problems in the future, they might also put in place a system to review and update those procedures regularly, or implement a more robust training program for all personnel who work with the equipment.
So it's about learning from the past and taking concrete steps to avoid making the same mistakes.
Exactly. It's that commitment to continuous improvement, driven by thorough investigations and effective KPA, that helps ensure pharmaceutical manufacturing processes are reliable and safe.
This deep dive is really highlighting how interconnected equipment, data integrity, and investigations are in pharmaceutical manufacturing.
They're all part of that larger quality system that ensures the safety and efficacy of those medications.
And it's clear that the FDA expects companies to have strong systems in place for managing equipment, handling data, and conducting thorough investigations. That's how they demonstrate compliance.
Absolutely. The FDA focuses on these areas because they're committed to protecting public health and ensuring patients have access to medications that are safe and effective.
It's incredible to think about how much detail goes into every aspect of pharmaceutical manufacturing, all with the goal of making sure those medications are high quality and safe for us to use.
It's definitely a complex process, but absolutely vital. Every step, from how the equipment is designed and qualified to the meticulous documentation of every procedure, all of it plays a role in protecting public health.
And the FDA takes that role very seriously.
Absolutely. They have a big responsibility to ensure that the medications we take are safe, effective, and manufactured to the highest standards. And that includes paying attention to the equipment used in the manufacturing process.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening. I'm feeling much more knowledgeable about how complex pharmaceutical manufacturing is and the role that equipment plays.
We've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore in the world of pharmaceutical equipment and the regulations that govern it.
I'm definitely eager to learn more. What other insights can you share about this topic?
Let's delve into an area that's often overlooked but essential: continuous improvement in equipment management.
Continuous improvement. You mean it's not enough to just meet the minimum requirements? You're saying companies need to constantly be looking for ways to make their equipment management practices even better.
Exactly. The FDA expects companies to be committed to continuous improvement in everything they do, and that includes how they manage their equipment. It's about going above and beyond just checking boxes. It's about striving for excellence.
So it's a mindset, a way of thinking, where you're always looking for ways to do things better, even if you're already meeting the requirements.
That's right. It's about creating a culture of quality throughout the organization, where everyone is encouraged to identify opportunities for improvement and contribute to making things better.
I understand the concept, but what does that actually look like in practice? How would a company demonstrate this continuous improvement in how they manage equipment?
It could take many forms, from adopting new technologies to streamlining processes to improving training programs. The key is to identify areas where you can make things better and then take action to implement those improvements.
So being proactive, not just waiting for things to go wrong.
Precisely. Continuous improvement is about finding ways to make equipment more reliable, reduce the risk of deviations, and improve how efficiently things operate.
I imagine data analysis would be a big part of this, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Companies need to be collecting and analyzing data on their equipment performance, maintenance activities, deviations, and investigations. That data can help them identify trends, patterns, areas where they can make improvements.
So it's not just reacting to problems. It's using data to anticipate potential problems and prevent them.
That's the idea. For example, if a company notices that a specific piece of equipment keeps breaking down, they might analyze the maintenance records and look for patterns. Maybe the current preventative maintenance schedule isn't enough?
And they might adjust the schedule or even decide to invest in a newer, more reliable piece of equipment.
Exactly. Data analysis can help companies make smart decisions about how they manage their equipment.
It sounds like continuous improvement is all about learning from experience and using that knowledge to make things better.
It is. And it's not just about reacting to problems, it's about anticipating those problems and taking steps to prevent them from ever happening.
I can also see how change control would be a crucial part of this process.
Mm-hmm.
If you identify an area for improvement, you'd use the change control process to implement those changes safely and effectively.
Absolutely. Change control is an essential tool for continuous improvement. Let's say a company finds a design flaw in a piece of equipment. They could use the change control process to modify that equipment and then verify that the modification fixes the problem without introducing new risks.
So it's a cyclical process. You find an area for improvement, implement the change, and then you see if it worked. And you just keep repeating that cycle, always looking for ways to improve things.
That's the idea. Continuous improvement is a journey, not a destination.
This continuous improvement part of Subpart D is really interesting. It shows that just meeting the minimum requirements isn't enough. It's about going above and beyond to make equipment reliable and ensure patient safety.
Exactly. It's this commitment to excellence that really sets the pharmaceutical industry apart. They're always looking for ways to improve their processes and deliver better results for patients.
This deep dive is really driving home the importance of continuous improvement in equipment management.
It's crucial. It shows you're committed to quality in everything you do.
And the FDA.
And the FDA expects companies to go the extra mile, always striving to do things better, even if they're already meeting the minimum requirements.
Right, that makes sense. It's like a continuous cycle of improvement. Okay, so we've talked a lot about what happens inside a pharmaceutical company, but what about the companies that supply the equipment in the first place? Do they have to follow Subpart D too?
That's a great point. Yeah, pharmaceutical companies often rely on external suppliers for various pieces of equipment, components, even services related to equipment maintenance. They can't manufacture everything in-house.
Right, that makes sense. It wouldn't be very efficient to try to build everything themselves.
Exactly. And just like a company needs to make sure its own equipment is suitable for its intended purpose, it also needs to make sure the equipment it gets from suppliers meets the same high standards.
So you can't just assume that the supplier is doing things right. You have to verify it somehow.
Exactly. The FDA expects companies to have a system for qualifying those equipment suppliers. It's called supplier qualification.
So it's like taking all those principles we've been talking about, all those Subpart D requirements, and applying them to the companies that provide the equipment.
That's a great way to think about it. It's about making sure those suppliers have the expertise, the facilities, the procedures, and the quality systems in place to produce equipment that meets those strict pharmaceutical standards consistently.
So you're not just looking at the equipment itself, you're looking at the whole operation of the supplier.
Exactly. It's about going beyond just checking off boxes and really understanding the supplier's commitment to quality. It often involves reviewing their documentation, conducting on-site audits, and really evaluating their track record.
Wow, that sounds pretty thorough, like a mini FDA inspection for the supplier.
In a way, it is. The company needs to gather evidence that the supplier can reliably deliver high-quality equipment that meets the specific needs of the pharmaceutical industry. It's a big deal because you're essentially trusting them with a crucial part of your manufacturing process and ultimately with the safety of your patients.
It's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
So what happens if a supplier goes through this rigorous assessment and they pass? What's the next step?
If everything checks out, the company might qualify that supplier. This usually means a formal agreement outlining the responsibilities of both parties, the quality standards they have to meet, and procedures for how they'll communicate and handle any problems that come up.
So it's like a partnership built on trust, but with very clear expectations and accountability.
Exactly. Both the company and the supplier need to be on the same page about quality, and open communication is key. And it doesn't stop there.
What do you mean?
Once a supplier is qualified, the company has to keep an eye on their performance. They need to make sure that the supplier continues to meet those agreed-upon quality standards. This might involve periodic audits, reviewing quality data from the supplier, and just keeping the lines of communication open to make sure everything's running smoothly.
So it's like a constant feedback loop, always checking in and making sure the supplier is still meeting expectations.
Exactly. Supplier qualification isn't a one-time thing, it's an ongoing process. It's about building strong relationships with suppliers who are just as committed to quality and patient safety as you are.
This whole concept of supplier qualification shows how interconnected everything is in the pharmaceutical industry. It's not just about what happens within a company's own walls, it's about ensuring quality across the entire supply chain.
You're absolutely right, and that interconnectedness is only going to become even more important as technology advances and the industry becomes more globalized.
Speaking of technology, we've been talking a lot about regulations, procedures, documentation. But I'm curious, how is technology impacting equipment management in the pharmaceutical world? Is it making things easier, harder, or a bit of both?
That's a great question. Technology is definitely playing a big role in shaping the future of equipment management in pharmaceuticals. It brings both opportunities and challenges.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's start with the opportunities. How is technology making things easier?
One area where technology is having a huge impact is data management and analytics. Think about all the data generated by pharmaceutical equipment, operating parameters, maintenance logs, calibration records, batch records. It goes on and on.
Right, and we talked about how crucial documentation is for compliance and investigations. But I can imagine that keeping track of all that data could be really overwhelming.
Absolutely. It's a massive amount of information. But that's where technology steps in. New tools and platforms are emerging that can capture, store, analyze, and even visualize huge amounts of data in ways that weren't possible before.
So instead of drowning in a sea of paper, companies have digital systems that help them make sense of it all.
Exactly. And these technologies can provide really valuable insights into how well equipment is performing, how efficient the process is, and the overall quality of the product.
So it's not just about collecting data. It's about using it to make better decisions and improve how things are done.
That's it. Data analytics can help companies identify trends, patterns, and even things that seem out of place, things that they might not notice otherwise. And that information can help them optimize processes, prevent deviations, and improve quality across the board.
Okay, that all makes sense. But you mentioned challenges too. What kind of challenges does technology bring to the table when it comes to equipment management?
One of the biggest is ensuring data integrity. Remember those LCOA principles? Well, they're even more crucial when you're dealing with electronic data.
Right, because electronic data can be changed so easily.
Yeah.
So you have to be extra careful to make sure it's secure, accurate, and hasn't been tampered with.
Exactly. Companies need to have robust systems in place to control who can access the data, track any changes, and just make sure the data is reliable.
That sounds like a lot to handle. Is the FDA providing any guidance on how companies should approach these new technologies?
Absolutely. The FDA knows technology is changing everything in the pharmaceutical world. They're working hard to provide guidance and clarify how to apply existing regulations to these new technologies.
So it's a collaborative effort. The FDA isn't just leaving companies to figure it out on their own.
Not at all. They're working with industry stakeholders to come up with best practices and standards for using new technologies while still meeting the regulatory requirements.
That's good to hear. It's reassuring to know that the FDA is keeping up with the times and helping the industry adapt.
They understand that technology can bring a lot of benefits to pharmaceutical manufacturing, but it's important to implement it responsibly, with patient safety always being the top priority.
Okay, so we've talked about data management. What other ways is technology impacting equipment management in pharmaceuticals?
Another really exciting area is automation. We're seeing more and more use of robots and automated systems for all sorts of tasks in pharmaceutical manufacturing, from dispensing ingredients to packaging those finished products.
I can see how automation could boost efficiency and reduce the chance of human error. But does it make things more complicated from a regulatory standpoint?
It does introduce some new challenges. For example, how do you validate an automated system? How do you prove that a robot is doing its job correctly every time? How do you make sure the software that controls the system is reliable and secure?
Those are good questions. How is the FDA addressing those challenges?
They've issued some guidances specifically for validating automated systems in pharmaceutical manufacturing. These documents offer recommendations for how companies can demonstrate that their automated equipment, including the software and control systems, is reliable and accurate.
So they're adapting the regulatory framework to keep up with those new technologies.
Exactly. As technology continues to advance, the FDA wants to make sure patient safety remains the #1 priority.
All this talk about automation makes me think about the future of equipment management in pharmaceuticals. What other exciting advancements are on the horizon? What can we expect to see in the coming years?
Well, one trend that's gaining a lot of traction is the whole concept of Industry 4.0. Have you heard of that?
I have, but I'm not entirely sure I understand what it means. Can you break it down for me?
Sure. It's essentially the idea of creating smart factories where all the systems are connected and talking to each other, data is flowing in real time, and automation is at the heart of everything. Imagine a network of sensors constantly monitoring equipment performance, alerting operators to potential problems before they even happen.
Wow, it sounds futuristic. How does that apply to equipment management specifically?
Imagine a sensor on a critical piece of equipment detects a small change in temperature. That information is instantly sent to a central control system, which analyzes the data and figures out that the change is within acceptable limits. No human intervention needed, production continues without a hitch.
That's amazing. So instead of waiting for an operator to notice a problem or for an alarm to go off,
Mhm.
the system can proactively identify and maybe even fix those issues in real time.
Exactly. This real-time data and analysis can revolutionize how equipment is managed, making it more proactive, predictive, and efficient.
So it's like having a team of virtual experts constantly monitoring the equipment, looking for any sign of trouble.
That's a great way to think about it. And that proactive approach doesn't just prevent costly downtime and deviations. It can also improve product quality by making sure that every batch is produced under those ideal conditions.
This is all so fascinating. It sounds like technology is really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in pharmaceutical manufacturing.
It is, but it's important to remember that technology is a tool. It's up to the people who design, implement, and use those technologies to make sure they're being used responsibly and ethically. Patient safety should always be the guiding principle.
That's such an important point. Technology can be incredibly powerful, but it needs to be used wisely, guided by human expertise and a commitment to doing what's right.
Absolutely. The future of pharmaceutical manufacturing is going to be shaped by both advances in technology and the people who use that technology. It's going to take human ingenuity and a strong ethical compass to make sure those advancements are used for good.
Well, this deep dive has really opened my eyes to how technology is transforming the pharmaceutical world. It seems like equipment management is right at the heart of all these changes.
It is, and those changes are ultimately about improving how patients are cared for. When technology is used responsibly, it can lead to medications that are safer, more effective, and even personalized to meet the needs of individual patients.
That's a really encouraging thought. So even with all the regulations and the complexities, there's a sense of optimism and excitement about the future of pharmaceutical manufacturing.
Absolutely. It's an industry that's always innovating, always looking for ways to improve its processes and deliver better outcomes for patients, and that's something to be excited about.
Okay, this has been an amazing journey through the world of pharmaceutical equipment and the regulations. But before we wrap up, I'm curious about one more thing: audits and inspections. I can only imagine how nerve-wracking it must be for a company to have the FDA come knocking.
I can understand why the thought of an FDA audit or inspection might be a bit intimidating. They scrutinize every aspect of a company's operations, and that includes how they manage their equipment. But those events aren't meant to be punitive.
What do you mean?
Think of audits and inspections as opportunities for continuous improvement. The FDA's main goal is to make sure companies are manufacturing medications that are safe and effective. And these events can help them identify areas where they can make improvements. They're not just looking for violations, they're also trying to help companies improve their processes and protect public health.
So it's more of a collaborative process than an adversarial one.
That's the idea. Open communication and transparency are key. The company should be prepared to show that they're complying with Subpart D and the overall quality system, but they should also be open to feedback and suggestions from the inspectors.
That makes sense. So when it comes to equipment specifically, what are the inspectors looking for?
They'll be looking at a lot of factors. Is the equipment right for its intended use? Does it meet the specific requirements of the manufacturing process? Is the equipment properly designed, installed, and qualified? Can the company provide documentation to back that up? Is the equipment maintained on a regular schedule? And are there records of those maintenance activities? Are the calibration records up to date and accurate? Can the company prove that the equipment is calibrated regularly and correctly? Is the equipment clean and free of contamination? Are there procedures to ensure cleanliness? And are those procedures being followed? Are there systems in place for change control and investigations? Can the company show how it manages changes to equipment and how it investigates any problems? Is the equipment properly labeled and documented? Can inspectors easily identify the equipment and find the associated records?
Wow, that's a lot to cover. It sounds like they're leaving no stone unturned.
They are definitely thorough. But remember, their goal isn't to catch companies doing something wrong. It's about making sure that they're operating in a way that protects public health.
So it's really in everyone's best interests, the company, the FDA, and especially the patients, to make sure that equipment management is top-notch.
Precisely. And the best way to be ready for an audit or inspection is to have a robust quality system in place, one that complies with Subpart D and all the other relevant regulations.
So it's about building a culture of quality, where quality is embedded in every aspect of the operation, from the design of the equipment to the training of personnel to the documentation of every single process.
You got it. And maybe even more importantly, a genuine commitment to quality. It needs to be more than just words. It needs to be part of the company's DNA.
Right, it has to be a core value. So instead of dreading those audits and inspections, companies should see them as opportunities to learn and grow.
That's the right attitude. And remember, being organized is crucial. The company needs to be able to quickly access all the relevant documentation, show they're following procedures, and answer the inspector's questions with confidence. A well-organized system makes a good impression and shows that they're on top of things.
So it's not just about doing things right, it's about being able to prove you're doing things right.
Exactly. Documentation is key. But it's not about creating mountains of paperwork. It's about having a system that's clear, concise, and easy to follow. The inspectors need to be able to understand your thinking and see why you made certain decisions.
Okay, so clear procedures, thorough documentation, well-trained personnel, and a commitment to continuous improvement. Those are the keys to acing an audit or inspection.
You got it. And at the heart of it all, a real dedication to quality.
This deep dive is really highlighting the level of scrutiny that pharmaceutical companies are under.
It's a highly regulated industry, and for good reason. The medications people take have a huge impact on their health. It's critical that they're manufactured to the highest standards.
And it's clear that equipment management is a big part of making sure those medications are safe and effective.
Absolutely. Subpart D, with its focus on equipment, is a fundamental part of the pharmaceutical quality system. Companies need to understand those regulations and stick to them. That's how they protect public health.
Well, I'm ready to keep learning about this fascinating world. What other insights can you share about how Subpart D is applied in the real world and how it connects to the bigger picture of the quality system?
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about handling deviations and investigations. You've heard us mention deviations a few times already, but let's really dive to how they're managed and the role that equipment plays in the process.
Deviations, huh? That sounds like something went wrong.
Well, they can be, but remember, they're also kind of inevitable in any complex manufacturing process. In the pharmaceutical world, a deviation is basically any unplanned event, any departure from the approved procedures or specifications.
So it could be anything from a piece of equipment malfunctioning to an operator making a mistake to a batch product failing a quality test.
Exactly. Deviations can come from all sorts of sources, and they don't always mean something serious is wrong. But they do need to be managed carefully to prevent them from turning into quality problems or safety concerns.
So how does a company handle a deviation when it happens? What steps do they need to take?
The FDA expects companies to have a robust system in place for managing deviations. It usually involves a few key steps. First, you have to recognize that a deviation has occurred, that something's not quite right. This could be through direct observation, an alarm going off, an out-of-spec result from a lab test, anything that suggests something isn't going according to plan. Once you spot a deviation, it's crucial to document it thoroughly, including the date, time, location, who was involved, and a detailed description of what happened. Then you assess the potential impact of that deviation. Could it affect the quality of the product? Could it pose a safety risk to patients? The level of concern will depend on the nature of the deviation and its potential impact. If the deviation is considered potentially significant, a formal investigation is launched to figure out the root cause, to understand why it happened. And finally, once you've identified the root cause, you develop and implement corrective and preventative actions, or KP. Corrective actions address the immediate issue, while preventative actions aim to stop similar deviations from happening in the future.
It sounds like a very thorough process. So it's not just about fixing the immediate problem. It's about understanding why it happened and taking steps to prevent it from happening again.
Exactly. It's all about learning from those deviations and using that knowledge to strengthen the process.
Okay, I see the big picture of deviation management. But how does equipment fit into all of this?
Equipment can be a big player in both detecting and investigating deviations. Think about all those sensors, alarms, and data logs associated with modern pharmaceutical equipment.
Okay, so you're saying that the equipment itself can actually alert us to a problem.
Exactly. Let's say a temperature controller on a critical piece of equipment malfunctions, and the temperature goes outside the acceptable range. That deviation might be detected by an alarm, or maybe an operator notices something's off on the equipment's display. In that case, the equipment is playing a role in detecting the deviation.
So the equipment is like an extra set of eyes constantly monitoring the process.
That's a great way to think about it. And then when you're investigating, the equipment's data logs can provide important clues about what caused the problem. For instance, those logs might show that the controller had been having intermittent errors leading up to the failure.
So you might see a pattern of problems before the big one happened. That's really helpful.
It is, and that kind of information is crucial for determining the root cause and deciding on the most effective corrective actions. Maybe the controller needs to be replaced, or maybe the preventative maintenance schedule needs to be tweaked. The data can help you make those decisions.
Wow, it's amazing how much valuable information is stored in those data logs. It's like a black box for the equipment.
It really is. And it's not just about malfunctions either. Equipment can also play a role in deviations that are caused by human error.
Oh, really? How so?
Okay, let's imagine an operator accidentally adds the wrong ingredient to a batch because a container was mislabeled. That's a human error. But if the mixing equipment is designed well and has the right sensors, it might detect that the mixture's properties are off and trigger an alarm.
So even when a human makes a mistake, the equipment can act like a safety net and prevent things from going really wrong.
That's right. And during the investigation, the equipment's logs might tell you the exact time and sequence of events, which helps you reconstruct what happened and identify any gaps in the procedures that contributed to the error. Maybe the labeling system needs to be improved, or maybe the operators need more training on how to handle materials properly.
It's amazing how equipment can be involved in so many aspects of deviation management, from spotting the problem to providing data for the investigation to even helping to prevent those errors from happening in the first place.
It really shows how important it is to understand equipment, not just from a technical standpoint, but from a quality and safety standpoint as well.
This deep dive is really helping me understand how complex deviation management is in pharmaceutical manufacturing and how crucial a role equipment plays in that process.
It's all part of the big picture, the quality system that ensures medications are reliable and safe.
And it's clear that the FDA wants companies to have robust systems for managing deviations, conducting investigations, and implementing corrective and preventative actions.
Absolutely. The FDA's focus on these areas is all about protecting public health. They want to make sure patients have access to medications that are safe and effective.
It's incredible to think about all the work that goes on behind the scenes to make sure the medications we take are safe and effective.
It's a real team effort. Scientists, engineers, quality professionals, operators, everyone's working together to meet those high standards for quality and patient safety.
This deep dive has been an incredible journey, learning about pharmaceutical equipment and the regulations that govern it.
And we've just scratched the surface. There's always more to learn and explore in this field.
Before we wrap things up completely, is there any final takeaway you want to leave with our listeners? What's the one message you want them to remember?
The key thing to remember is this. Equipment management in the pharmaceutical industry isn't just about the technical stuff. It's the very foundation of the entire quality system. It's a system that's designed to protect public health and make sure those medications we all rely on are safe and effective.
So it's not just about machines and regulations, it's about people and their well-being.
Exactly. Companies need to understand the ins and outs of equipment design, qualification, maintenance, data integrity, continuous improvement. That's how they make their operations reliable, minimize those risks, and ultimately deliver those life-changing medications to patients who need them.
That's a really powerful message. It reminds us that behind every pill and injection is a whole network of equipment and processes, all carefully managed to make sure that medication is safe, effective, and the best quality it can be.
Precisely. The next time you pick up a prescription, take a moment to appreciate all the work that goes on behind the scenes. There are a lot of dedicated professionals making sure that medication is safe and effective.
Well said. Thank you so much for guiding us through this complex world of pharmaceutical equipment and the regulations that govern it.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure. And remember, the learning never stops. There's always more to discover in the world of pharmaceutical manufacturing.
That's a great point. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.
Absolutely. It's an industry that's constantly innovating and pushing the boundaries, always seeking ways to improve its processes and deliver better outcomes for patients. And that's like something to be excited about.
It is. It's inspiring to see how much dedication and ingenuity goes into making sure the medications we rely on are safe and effective. Okay, so we've talked about advanced materials, 3D printing, nanotechnology. It sounds like the future of pharmaceutical equipment is going to be pretty high-tech.
It definitely is. And it's not just about the materials and manufacturing techniques themselves. It's about how those technologies are integrated into the whole manufacturing process. Remember that concept of Industry 4.0 we talked about earlier?
The smart factories with interconnected systems and real-time data exchange. Yeah, that was pretty mind-blowing.
Well, Industry 4.0 is going to have a major impact on how equipment is managed in pharmaceuticals. Imagine equipment that can communicate with each other, share data instantly, and even make adjustments on its own to optimize performance.
Okay, that's getting into some serious sci-fi territory. But really, how would that work in a real-world setting? Can you paint me a picture?
Sure. Think of it this way. You have a network of sensors all over the manufacturing facility, constantly monitoring every aspect of the equipment. Temperature, pressure, flow rate, vibration, everything. That data is sent to a central control system that uses really sophisticated algorithms to analyze it, all in real time.
So it's like having a digital brain overseeing the whole operation.
That's a great way to put it. And this digital brain can do some pretty amazing things. For example, it can pick up on subtle changes in equipment performance that might be a sign of a problem down the road.
So instead of waiting for a piece of equipment to break down completely, the system can see those early warning signs and let operators know so they can take action.
Exactly. It's called predictive maintenance, and it's really changing the game for equipment management. It can drastically cut down on downtime, prevent expensive repairs, and make sure that equipment is always running at its best.
It seems like it could also improve safety by catching those potential problems before they turn into something more serious.
Absolutely. And predictive maintenance is just one example of how Industry 4.0 can really make a difference. It can also be used for better process control and optimization.
What do you mean by that?
Imagine systems that can automatically adjust things like temperature or pressure based on real-time data. That would make sure that each batch is produced under those perfect conditions. You'd see higher yields, fewer deviations, and more consistency in the product.
So it's not just about avoiding problems, it's about constantly tweaking the process to get the best possible results.
Precisely. And that level of control and optimization, it's only possible when you have these interconnected systems and data sharing that you get with Industry 4.0.
It's incredible to see how technology is really changing the pharmaceutical industry, making it smarter, more efficient, and ultimately safer for patients.
It's definitely an exciting time. But we have to remember that technology is just a tool. The people who design, implement, and use those technologies, they have to be the ones to make sure those tools are used responsibly and ethically, with patient safety always top of mind.
That's a crucial point. Technology can do a lot of good, but it has to be guided by human expertise and those strong ethical principles.
Couldn't agree more. The future of pharmaceutical manufacturing is going to be shaped by both the advancements in technology and by the people who guide how that technology is used. Human ingenuity and that moral compass are going to be key to making sure those advancements are used for the benefit of everyone.
Well, this deep dive has given me a really interesting glimpse into the future of pharmaceutical manufacturing, and it's looking pretty promising.
It is. It's an exciting time to be a part of this industry. I'm optimistic that all these advancements in equipment management are going to lead to better outcomes for patients everywhere.
Well said. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us and walking us through this complex and fascinating world. I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot from this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, the learning never stops. There's always more to discover in the world of pharmaceutical manufacturing.
That's a great reminder. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the crucial role that equipment plays in making sure our medications are safe and effective. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.